Good evening, New Hampshire music educators. This is Marcia McCaffrey. I'm the arts consultant at the New Hampshire Department of Education. And this session is devoted to going through the recently published New Hampshire Music Education Return to School 2020, which is a publication by the New Hampshire Music Education Coalition. So during this session, which is recorded, we'll have a chance to introduce you to the document, take you through some of the major sections, do some highlights, take some questions as we go along. And if there's time remaining, have everyone go into breakout rooms and you'll have a chance to talk about what's going on in your school with the return plan with students. We have an agenda that will probably take about 35 or 45 minutes. Kind of depends on the questions and the flow of the hour ahead, but that's our time frame for today, this evening. I want to start by introducing the New Hampshire Music Education Coalition that really came together under the, as we say, the opportunity provided by a crisis. So a great chance for music educators of variety to come together and form the New Hampshire Music Ed Coalition. You can hear more about that from one of the members. But the organizations that are part of the New Hampshire Music Ed Coalition, you'll see right there on the cover page, are the New Hampshire Music Educators Association, New Hampshire American Choral Directors Association, New Hampshire chapter, of course, New Hampshire Band Directors Association, and the state chapter of the American String Teachers Association. So the planning committee was represented by Joe Mundy and Sean Marr and Bunny Serenita. Will Gunn for choral, tonight represented by Lauren Pythman and Ben Green. So everybody is here tonight to talk you through particular sections of the document. And before we get going, if you have questions, if you would put those in the chat and we'll manage those as we go along. And then if we have time and it works out, we'll open up mics and maybe do some oral questions or just go into breakout rooms. So feel free to use the chat, and the chat also becomes part of the recording as it's on my screen. And I'm going to take this opportunity before we roll into the full agenda for the return to school is to let all of you know that there is a Modern Band grant application available through the New Hampshire Department of Education, where 12 schools will be selected to participate in modern band training and receive instruments for either expanding a program or building modern band into your already music program. And besides that, there's also an online composing and songwriting course where we can have up to 40 teachers participate in that. So I'm gonna put in the chat the link to the Department of Ed webpage that gives you all of the information. And the applications close this Friday. And so I want to make sure that you're well aware of it and we get teachers that are interested in adding that to their program the chance to do so. And so I am putting that in the chat so you have a link, but save that for later because I want you to give full attention to the return to school. And I want to pass this along now to Joe Mundy, who's going to talk a little bit about the process. Hi, Joe, take it away.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Marcia. Thanks everybody for being here. I am Joe Mundy. I'm the president of the New Hampshire Music Educators Association. Like Marcia said, this coalition developed early, I guess in maybe May, around the issues that we're all facing around coronavirus. So the idea was to use representative organizations from all the different, specialized areas in music education that we have in our state to try to create this guidance document. So we started by looking and collecting at similar documents that had started to come out of other states a real range of things we were seeing, some really detailed information, despite this being so early. Now we're talking maybe early June, and then others that were fairly vague. So we knew that there was a lot of research being done. We knew that there were guidelines coming eventually from the New Hampshire Department of Ed in July. So we wanted to wait and make sure that information had come out before we put out a document of our own. So over the past month and a half or so, we've been meeting regularly to review documents and research information that's been coming from various national organizations and these research studies. And our task here was to compile this document and this information for all of you to try to address, the wide array of concerns that we'll be facing as a field this year, as a profession, and really to promote the idea that we can safely educate our music students in the classroom this year. Whereas we're seeing many states' education departments saying, we shouldn't even bother trying to do music. And we didn't want that to be the way New Hampshire was moving forward. So you'll see in the document, there's a lot of links to all the source documents, many more resources for people to dig in a lot further, and things that'll apply to their specific situations. And so here it is for you now. And then I think we're going to move to Bunny to talk more about the reason we wanted to put it together.
Thanks, Joe. My name's Bunny Serenita. I'm the president of the New Hampshire Band Directors Association. And Joe already touched on this, but the purpose of this publication was driven by two larger ideas. The first is to provide guidance for providing safe delivery of music education for students and staff as we return to school. And the second is to provide music educators with resources for advocacy, so we have the tools to ensure that quality music education continues to be an important facet of our schools as we return, especially making those tools available to districts or teachers that are having a harder time perhaps convincing their administration that we can indeed provide music education safely for everyone. So I think that brings us back to Marcia.
We distributed the publication on Friday. As soon as it was all wrapped up, we got it out as quickly as we could. So for distribution, this was sent to all of the superintendents through the superintendent's listserv at the Department of Ed, and I was able to send that out. I also sent it to the list of music educators that I get, which comes from our Bureau of Certification. So it's not a complete list because some teachers put their personal email in our database rather than your school email, which is all I have and want access to. But asking, of course, all of you to spread it around as well. But that's not all. It's also posted as much as possible through social media. So on the Facebook pages and the social media sites of the organizations. And if you're a member of these organizations, you'll also be receiving information again in the next day or two as our team members send these out to the association members as well. So we're really trying to get this out there, get it in the hands of superintendents. And if you could take the opportunity to get it into the hands of your administrators, that would be terrific as well, because really all those decisions that will be made at the local level, at the school level, between you and your on-site task force or planning committees around this really very complicated issue of returning to school in 2020. And as Bunny had said, and Joe, both in New Hampshire, it's really important for us that if we're getting kids back into school, that they really should continue with their music education. And we want to be able to show some broad recommendations about how that can be done for you to take and then make particular decisions at your local level. So much is going to be left up to you in this decision-making process. So we're really glad to have you all here tonight and really glad to be able to pull this information together for you. And I am now passing it over to Sean, who was our master graphic, pull the document together designer and wizard of all things, turn it into a beautiful publication. Sean Marr, take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, and thank you for coming. As you know, going forward, the local level advocacy is going to be a huge thing, so I'll definitely be touching on that. But for my first task, I just want to go through kind of the highlights and overview of the publication. So I'll be doing a screen share, and we'll kind of hit some of the major points, but leave most of the digging down deep to our other coalition members. So here comes the screen share. And here is our wonderful first page of the document. Isn't it beautiful, folks? All right, moving on. The purpose, unprecedented and unpredictable times, and coalition description page is the first thing to come up, just so you get a background. This document was very much created for multiple audiences. So we were intending for superintendents, administrators, parents, even community members, and teachers, of course. So just giving some background information about why this document exists and why our coalition exists and all the members of it. So there's some basic information here, but definitely this can be a starting point for some advocacy if you are in need in your district for that. We're definitely trying to push the idea for administrators to understand that music education can be something that is mitigated, and it can be something that is, changed a little bit. Maybe it looks different than what you're used to, and you should empower your teachers to be collaborating with you on that and making sure that they're still the ones making decisions about how they're going to be providing the best music education they can. So that's kind of where we start. Of course, the table of contents, there's a lot here. My priority in talking to you tonight will be on the advocacy section. So I'll double back at the end to go back there and talk to you a bit about advocacy at the local level. But inside this advocacy section, we have information about, and I'll zoom in here, we have information about maintaining sequential music education. We have a document co-signed by hundreds of organizations. The Arts Education is Essential document from NAFME, which is one of the addenda at the end of our document. And also personalized learning and competency-based education. Now, obviously, more than ever is going to be a time where that is so possible and is so something we can do with our students. And there's some guidance there as well for administrators. A lot of this is really administrative. The advocacy section is very administrator friendly. So that sort of language is going to be something great for you to look at. Also, the making and creating of the arts together, maintaining that is super important. And it's something that obviously we want to be able to do in person, but we can only do so much as we are available within our different districts, phased situations, whatever, what have you. So some language there, social emotional learning and music education as well. We also have an addenda with a brochure created by NAFME that has all sorts of SEL language, which SEL is one of those areas that's going to be great for you to mention because it is not only a buzz topic right now with being remote for so long and with children needing that extra support, but it's also tied to grant funding and tied to ESSA. So you'll be able to get some support with your funding and programming in that area. The next big section is our state guidelines, which we just have to give a little round of applause and thank you for Marcia, who went through the state guidelines and pulled out all sorts of different information that could pertain specifically to music and arts instruction. So we maintained that list and we loved it, and we did add a little bit of guidance of our own in as well. So that's split up into 4 sections: the state guidelines, major considerations, social emotional, physical, school environment, and remote instruction. So we'll go through that a little bit and show you where we've made some adjustments. And then we get into what you're probably really looking for, which is the overall music education guidelines, the more specific things. So we start off with general music education. And this is stuff that applies, it's not only just for, what you imagine as K-5 general music or middle school general music or electives at the high school, what have you, but really that can be applied to everyone. And then even the general music educators, we suggest that you look through the other sections as well. If you're using percussion or you're using recorders and those, or you're singing or whatever you happen to be doing in your general music instruction, look at the other sections that are also related to that. So we split out by section and kind of, we tackled it by going through obviously our different organizations. So the Band Directors Association was very influential in the woodwinds and brass, and we had a percussion representative obviously as well in our choral association, all that. So we did try to make sure that we were using our best resources to give you the best guidance. So at the end, we also have some information about HVAC and general cleaning and instrument cleaning. So that's something that could apply to everyone as well. And we suggest you look into that data that came out of Colorado. That is where a lot of our information is coming from. Even though it's preliminary, we'll be maintaining this document and updating it along the way. So you'll see changes. And one thing I want you to notice, if you go to the first page, the cover page, you'll see down in the bottom right that it was published on July 31st and it has 8 a.m. marked. Then the last updated, this is actually like just like you can imagine, like a formula. It's just a button I click that anytime I hit save on my computer for this document and I make changes, they will update to the exact time that the file has been changed. So once I make a change and I push it out and I publish it, that will be updated along the way and show you when the latest information was changed. It's possible that just some formatting or something like that happened. If there is a major change, we'll definitely put it out through our social media and email as well. So be aware we won't just be relying on the date at the bottom of the front page. So there's a general overview of the document, and I'm going to welcome in, who was taking the general music section? Were we going with Bunny or Joe, or I forget?
Bunny.
Bunny, okay. So I'm gonna scroll over to the general music section first, and we'll go with Bunny. I forgot to double back for advocacy, but somebody remind me at the end because that's probably going to be a big topic.
Okay.
That's okay.
As Joe mentioned at the beginning, we did a lot of research, and there are states that have many more people than us working on these, and we found that North Carolina had published a comprehensive list of recommendations for general music. So along with highlighting selected points, you can access their entire document with the general music section in the embedded link. The bullets listed in our document are general and can be applied to all music classrooms, as Sean spoke to. And additionally, you might find reading the guidance listed in other music sections makes sense. For example, if you're using classroom percussion or keyboards or guitars, you'll find more specific guidance for consideration under those headings. If you plan to play a wind instrument during general music classes, then it makes sense to read the section for woodwinds and brass winds. And referencing the choral section will help you make decisions about safe singing in your classroom for general music classes. Just a few standout points. I know the state of New Hampshire has said 3 feet for social distancing is okay if needed to make things work in our schools, but all the research points to, for music activities, music making, we want to make sure we're underlining the point that we really do need 6 feet of distancing. That's what's recommended for safe music making. And for general music classes where you might be dancing or doing movement, 10 feet is required for any of those activities that required an increased heart rate. So you can read through all the other points. The link there to the comprehensive list is there, but that gives you an overview of the general music section. And I think that's to Joe now.
Yes. All right. Thanks. Yeah. Well, so Ben Green and I will talk through strings, percussion, and all that. So actually, Ben, do you want to start with strings?
Oh, you're muted, Ben.
Sorry about that. So the information for strings came from the American String Teachers Association. They came out actually with a pretty great document, and it's very specific, and will give you information on a lot of your questions. But I'm going to highlight just a couple of things, especially if you're in schools where somebody might be recommending something for you for cleaning. Remember, when you're dealing with wooden instruments, whether it's strings or guitars, or even, woodwind instruments that are wood, using alcohol-based products is a no-no. And so you might have a well-meaning custodian or administrator that is giving you a case of Clorox wipes. That's not something you would take to a string instrument. And they give some very specific, ASTA gives very specific recommendations as to how you can clean your instruments. Thank you. And the only thing on a string instrument, whether it's a guitar or a bowed string instrument, that you want to use alcohol on, you could put some rubbing alcohol on a cloth, on a clean cloth, and you could use that to clean the strings themselves. Never spray it on those strings. As far as cleaning the instrument in the neck, you would never use an alcohol-based product for that. As far as keyboards go, and this could include piano, cleaning piano keyboards, again, you would never take a spray product and spray it on the keyboard. You can use a cleaning product to clean the keys on a keyboard, but you need to spray it onto a clean cloth and gently wipe the keys. You don't want to be scrubbing the keys, and you certainly, with electronic keyboards, don't want to be getting anything into the keyboards. The other thing that you want to remember, and this was going to go with all the instruments that our students are studying, students shouldn't be sharing instruments. Now, in the case of bowed string instruments, cellos and basses sometimes are shared by students. So it's going to be your job as a string teacher to make sure that those instruments are properly cleaned before those instruments are shared with other students in other classes. So again, you can read the information with the links here in this document. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. I'll be happy to help you if you're not sure where to go to. Thanks.
And I will talk through the percussion information. So percussion presents certain challenges, but also makes certain things a lot easier. You don't have to worry so much about what's happening with aerosols differently than you do regularly, of course. But one big piece of advice, and all the information for percussion is coming from the Percussive Arts Society. And so they do recommend for our students, yeah, and you can find the link in the document to find a beefier version of the information. But a big recommendation, same as strings, keep the equipment separate for the kids. So if it's possible, sort of a mallet stick pack for your school students would be great. So like a stick bag with a pair of yarn, rubber, mallets, maybe timpani mallets, depending on how your program works, snare drum sticks, and then a couple things for drum set, wire brushes or drum set sticks as well. And outfitting each kid with their own little kit like that would be ideal. Obviously, you don't have to necessarily buy formal stick bags. You could create them or something like that. And I think you can find fairly cheap products if you're looking for that. I'm also happy, by the way, to answer questions about any of these things as you go forward. And then we also included a list of guidelines for marching percussion, which, as you see, are quite similar to most of the things that you've already heard as far as distancing, just keeping kids separate, sanitizing. But since, of course, a lot of groups might actually be into rehearsals now, make sure you're paying attention to these things. So that's percussion. And on the next page, you'll see some cleaning guidelines around piano. And so, of course, as with everything, keeping instruments separate, not sharing those things, and then being really careful with the products that you're using. Alcohol-based products not good for pianos, and so you'll want to do some research around the proper types of things, and you'll see in the piano care area there are some actual products, specific products recommended from these piano technicians guilds that you might want to check out, depending on how many pianos you have. And so I think now we move on to woodwinds and brass.
Yes. For woodwinds and brass winds, we have the research-based guidance from the aerosol study that is linked in there as well. Most of you are aware of the university research that's been going into the studies of aerosol production of wind instruments and the mitigation of those aerosols. That research is the basis of our recommendations right now. And as Sean mentioned, we will be updating the document as new information comes into us. The larger takeaways are about distancing. Again, while New Hampshire has said 3 feet's okay for music making, it needs to be 6 feet. Trombones require the additional spacing so that they're a 9 by 6 foot. And another item for rehearsals, if you have a group, is that the students should be in rows, not arcs. They should all be facing the same way. And to be outside as much as you can possibly be while the weather's holding for us. There's a lot of research that shows masks are quite efficient at mitigating the aerosols produced in woodwind and brasswind playing. For those that need to have a mouthpiece, there are masks being produced. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the advertisements. You can also do a mask with the slit in it for mouthpieces. There are, I'm sure most of you have seen the advertisements too for the bags, for the flutes and the clarinets, as a lot of the aerosols do come through the keyholes. Those are all worth you looking into. And then bell covers as well are proving to be a good mitigating factor. Condensation, also known as spit, should not be emptied on your floors. So looking at puppy pads or similar is strongly recommended to take care of the condensation. And then you can read through it. I'm happy to answer questions as well. There's a lot of links that can bring you to some resources for supplies. And I think that brings us to the choral portion.
Right. Hi, good evening, everybody. Will Gunn, who is our representative from ACDA for this coalition, was unable to be here tonight. So my name is Lauren Pythman, and I'm here in his place from the ACDA board. I think the choral music world got pretty rocked at the beginning of May when ACDA and the NATS organization held a webinar, which was pretty scary. And I think we've come a long way since that webinar, and I'm happy to see these recommendations here, which are pretty doable, I think, for most school districts. I just want to highlight a few things for you here that, you know, I think one of the scariest parts of that webinar was the idea that we wouldn't be able to sing anymore with our students. And I don't think that that's true. And this document sort of highlights that with some changes and a few protocols, singing is still possible for you and your students. So I recommend that you read these bullets and also check out the 2 links here on this document for more information. The Colorado information, that research is still ongoing and a little bit late. We were hoping that we would have it by now, and we just don't. So again, as other people have mentioned, I'm sure this document could be updated to reflect that information when it does, in fact, get released. I don't know about you, but I've been checking the NFHS website pretty much every day, hoping that the info is there. So I'm sure when it comes out, we'll all be made aware. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One is that as a music teacher and as a choral teacher, your vocal health is just as important as that of your students. And so it's important that you think about how you will maintain your vocal health. There's a bullet here about using a portable amplifier to help you with your voice when you're teaching. And I think that's a really great idea because we don't know what kind of strain this kind of teaching is going to have on our voices. And that goes for all music teaching. One question that came up in our district too is discussions with classroom teachers. So you may want to offer some suggestions for classroom teachers as well who may use singing as part of their instruction, and just consider sharing this information with classroom teachers that you know do utilize singing in their classrooms. And also just 2 other quick points that are maybe off this document, but something to consider. One is that, you know, many of us may be traveling to spaces that are not our own spaces in the fall for whatever reason in your district. You may be going into other classrooms. So I would just encourage you to make sure that you ask for what you need. And don't hesitate to ask for what you need to teach your subject and teach it effectively and safely. You know, use your voice and ask for what you want and what is necessary to be safe. And lastly, I think a lot of us will be hopefully supplementing our in-person instruction with some technological tools, which is great. I know in the choral world, we've been getting a lot of information about virtual choir software and how to keep your choir singing off campus. And that's all great. But again, please make sure that you check with your IT supervisors in your district, because there is a lot of legislation in New Hampshire around student identifying information. And we want to make sure that whatever technology we're using to supplement our instruction is supported by that IT department in your district. So just keep remembering that as well. But I think that there's some really great tools here, and again, in those highlighted links, and hopefully, fingers crossed, as soon as that NFHS new research comes out, if there's anything that we need to update, we will certainly do so and get that information out to our membership here in New Hampshire. So again, a much rosier view, I think, than what we got in May. And we're excited about getting back to singing in classrooms for sure. So with that, I'm gonna swing back over to Marcia. And Marcia, you wanna take the next step, or Sean, do you wanna swing back over to advocacy for a minute?
Yes, actually, I would love to. Thanks so much. And I actually just want to continue on and finish this last couple portions that weren't really thought about under a content-specific area, but HVAC is one of those areas. This is also directly out of that aerosol study. And this last bullet point is probably one of the most important ones to bring up to your facilities crew or your director of facilities. Asking about the air changes per hour in your space will give you a better understanding of how much time you need to allow between ensembles and between teaching in your space. There's a suggestion of having 3 air changes per hour in order to clean the room effectively and allow those aerosols to be brought out through the HVAC system. And you'll also want to be checking with them to make sure that your HVAC system is or can be fitted with HEPA filters. A lot of districts obviously might be using lower tier filters in their HVAC systems, or might just not be up to code with HVAC at all. So it's a good idea to get those conversations started early so that you have an idea of how much time you're actually going to be allowed to use your space and how much time you need to prepare to have that space emptied in order for the air to be cleaned. Then the next part over here, these are, this might be a little bit late or information you've already seen, so I'll just cover it quickly. If you click this link at the top, you can get the exact press release and all that. This was actually published April 24th, so this was before school closed, as directors were trying to figure out how to collect instruments back from students, how are we sending them out for repair, all those sorts of things. So there's some guidance on how much time to allow an instrument to basically be quarantined on its own, and then what kind of cleaning solutions you can use also. There's more specific information if you go to this link at the top with the source. You can get all sorts of great info on what kind of cleaning solutions there are out there. And then there's just obviously our contributors, which I'll go through and update this contributors list and put in a hyperlink for each person so you can click on it and get directly to us by email. That's one thing I didn't do, but I will go back and do. And then for my last little section here, I'm going to go back and actually 2 things. One, we skipped over all that wonderful work Marcia did, which was the state guidelines. And I did that partially because, well, I forgot. And the other part was because hopefully you've read the state guidelines by now. But there are a couple points in here where we have made our own bold information that I wanted to draw your attention to. And it's under the major considerations, which the first part is actually an advocacy piece we had early on in the summer where we wrote letters to the governor and to the commissioner about including music educators on your reopening task forces at the district and building level. If you need support getting your voice heard, do not wait. reach out to me, let me know. I'd rather know as soon as possible that, you know, they're not listening to you, they're not hearing you. I can call, I can get in touch with those SAU offices or those superintendents or principals, whomever, and try to advocate for you. I'm happy to do it. Then our next point, which Bunny actually already did bring up, which is that while the 3 to 6 was being floated in the state, we do recommend maintaining that 6-foot spacing during music making activities. And we said, we actually went around a few times with figuring out how to word it. So we said music making activities with the idea that it includes general music classrooms, ensembles, all those sorts of things. And even in a regular education classroom that is using music, a music making activity within that class should maintain 6-foot spacing. All right, now for the last bit, and then we'll do Q&A. This is the advocacy stuff, which I think is vitally important, and I'm happy to take many questions afterward. So the first part, social sequential music education for all must continue. This is probably one of the big points we're trying to push, is that as defined by the minimum standards for public school approval here in New Hampshire, we do need to provide a music education for all students K through 8. And then in the high school, we do have a half graduation credit requirement as well. So you do have to be offering those sorts of electives. It gets into a tricky situation sometimes, though, when our legislation on the books says music, and what we imagine as music is our band or choir or orchestra, and we do not imagine that as just a general music course, which absolutely we should maintain the ensembles, and you should do everything you can to push back for maintaining your ensembles. What often, though, administrators will try to do is say, well, I don't think it's safe to have band or chorus or orchestra right now, so you should be having a general music class instead. And the first thing I do is I say, well, that's not what the kids signed up for. That's not the course we've been providing, and that's not what they're expecting. I can modify my instruction so that it is safe. Here are all of these resources about how I can do that. And yes, in my classroom, I will do everything I can to minimize the amount of time we are singing or playing to the levels that are recommended within this guidance. So if I have 45-minute class periods and it suggests that I have 30 minutes, well, okay, then I'm going to break up the playing and singing to only being 30 minutes and use the other 15 minutes to prepare them for some sort of flipped or blended learning. So preparing, I think, number one, the first thing you're going to be wanting to do at the beginning of the school year is preparing your students for what it's going to look like when you go remote, because eventually we have to all assume that we will at some point be back to full remote. If you're not planning for that, you're behind. So yes, plan for potentially being back to full remote. Obviously, we don't want that situation, but it's just something you need to be prepared for. Arts Education is Essential is another document that can help you in providing that messaging, and it comes from all these national organizations that your administrators will probably have heard of. So even more clout to your argument is basically what that is. Definitely go through and read that if you have not. Obviously, the personalized learning, competency-based education, we've been through that. PD is also something you definitely want to be talking to your administration about, because the focus is obviously going to be a lot on remote instruction, but it will most likely take the form of a very general education lens, whereas you could probably do better with, if you have an arts administrator in your district, asking for music-specific help and music-specific PD. And if you don't have an arts administrator within your district, then you should be advocating with all of your colleagues on, well, here's some software we're thinking about using. We have no idea how it works. Do you think we could get a half day to maybe get a demo from this company, or go through all those processes that you can and take all the steps you can to get PD that is meaningful for you, and not just, well, here's how we're going to do Google Classroom, because you probably know most of that already. So that would be my advice for you, is to make sure that you're getting PD specific to you. SEL, of course, we've gone through that. There's actually more links here. This is the hard part of this document, is maybe that there are just links everywhere and it has more information for you, but you'll definitely want to go through these 4 links here at the bottom. That's one spot, especially where we have some additional resources for you to go through. So in terms of advocacy, I just wanted to put myself out there as a resource as well, because I've heard musings from different districts all over the place, and I won't name any, but depending on what your situations are, I've heard from folks about, well, they're trying to change me into a general music teacher, or they're trying to tell me that I'm just going to be an extra body and I'm going to be reducing numbers in the elementary school, or what have you. All of these things are ridiculous. If you're having that sort of situation, you should be reaching out to me as soon as possible, as well as your union, because at this point you've already signed a contract that probably states you're a music teacher. And if you're having trouble with teaching music as your contract states, then that's a grievable thing. So if you are having trouble in that area, please reach out to me as soon as you can. Let me know what's wrong. If you know a friend of yours or somebody in the area that is, maybe not at this meeting, encourage them to reach out to me as well. I kind of view one of my roles as the chair of advocacy and membership outreach for NHMEA as kind of the music educator union grievance chair. So like if you are having trouble, I will come in and educate your parent booster to advocate for you. I will come in and talk with your department as a whole about how you could advocate on many different fronts. And obviously this year, that means we're probably going to do a Zoom, whereas in the past, I've definitely gone and driven and had late night meetings with parent groups and all that. Please feel free to reach out for anything like that. I'm happy to help. And with that, I will kick it back over to Marcia, and then we'll go into our Q&A.
Thank you, everybody. That was really a great overview of the whole document. There's been a lot of great information going in the chat as well. So I'm going to circle back to Scott's request to spend a little bit more time on social emotional learning. There's so much research coming out right now that the students are really in reconnecting with each other, reconnecting with teachers, and having felt disconnected, bringing them back together and providing that social and emotional foundation. Even the state guidelines start off by saying you need to spend the first week just, with that re-entry with students, and establish that communication relationship, not only with you and the students, but students to each other, and also communicating back to parents. And with that said, there's a lot to sort of different levels. So how do you leverage a music curriculum to complement social emotional learning? Of course, and I will say one reason that Little Kids Rock, who will be providing the professional development for composing and songwriting, one reason that we went with that composing and songwriting course as the entree point to modern band and opening it up to as many teachers as we can is because kids will get a chance to compose simple songs or whatever level of songwriting they're ready for as a way to express themselves. So that is in support of social and emotional learning as well. So anywhere from how can you modify or leverage what music brings naturally to the social and emotional understanding or expression of your students, to doing something more theoretical. And that's where we can get to the crosswalk between the National Core Art Standards with the CASEL social emotional competencies. And that link is in the document that will take you to that crosswalk, which supports standards-based music education, but also in that way that you see the connections between, well, the social emotional competency, thank you, Sean, in self-awareness, the whole list, which there it is, there's the link right there that he was pointing to on the page. But the 4 artistic processes and then the social emotional competencies on the left side. So it's really easy to sort of make a case for how the arts align with social emotional learning, but you want to do more than just make a case and go to this theoretical. You want to use this as a stepping off point in either lesson planning or idea generation. There's also some lessons. They're collecting lessons there on the website to share. So add your own and learn from others. And this is really just starting to build. I think this was released in July, maybe end of June. So it's all right there for right now, and will only get more rich and robust. Who else would like to add? You know, anybody on the line? Lauren's going to add, but we can also open it up to others. Go, Lauren.
I actually found that particular link super helpful, and I also forwarded it to the team in our district that's working on emotional wellness and supports for students, just to say, you know, hey, we're already doing this, here it is, you know. And I think that that's just a good little feather in our cap as music teachers to say, you know, we don't need a whole separate committee for our subject. We already have this embedded in all the things that we do. If you're interested in more information about music and social emotional learning, I'd really recommend checking out any webinar by Scott Edgar, who is one of the leading voices in music and social emotional learning. You can find some of those on the Arts Ed New Jersey website, as well as I think there's a few in the NAFME COVID resources document as well. But he is just a fantastic speaker and engaging and knows a lot of things. So I would recommend Scott Edgar as a person to check out if you're interested in learning more about SEL.
Thank you, Lauren. Bunny, did you want to add also about the committee you're on at your school?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was fortunate to be asked to be on the social emotional committee task force back to school, which has been great because I have been able to use that SEL Arts out of New Jersey. But it's been a great advocacy for the program too, as New Hampshire schools are making SEL a main focus, even with academics or even before. It's been great to be able to talk about all the ways that band and chorus and music making already do all the SEL. So if you can get involved in your student wellness or staff wellness back to school task force, you're an invaluable resource to that planning committee for sure.
Anybody else on the call want to open up the mic and add anything about social emotional learning? Scott, did that help? Good. Good, very good. So let's see, we have about 10 minutes left. We can take questions from the group, or I can just do a carte blanche sort of breakout rooms. And you can talk for 10 minutes in your smaller groups. I also want to say that Jenny suggested, and you know, a great idea for to keep offering these sessions like this. And as we move into now the school year, to really be sharing what's your school doing, how are you setting up, how are you practicing safety in the music classroom. So I'll continue to provide these, you know, large group sessions like this where we really break out and devote most of that time so you can talk to each other. It may be more towards the end of August, you know, August 20th or after that. I have a little vacation time coming up, but I will definitely get those sessions going again. Anything you request and I can meet that request, I want to honor that. So I do intend, I will be doing that some more. So what questions do you have, either in the chat or just on mic, and let's see what we can do to help you before we get off the line here. I can talk a little bit about the chat that I put in about the next round of funding. You know, we don't know when that's going to come out. They are still negotiating that in Congress. but it sounds like it's going to be soon. And if they don't come to it soon, it's just going to be too late. So I would think within the next few days, they'll come to some decision. There's a real focus on that next federal relief package for education, both higher ed and K-12. So there should be another, really significant round of money coming to schools. So to get what you need to be able to teach music on a cart, to get what you need for individual student, music making bundles. So I think being able to share resources like that right away, what you're coming up with, what you're finding, and I really appreciate the detail, the knowledge that all of you have. You can, offer, hey, here is a good keyboard, and here are some other resources. You're such a great community for each other. So we'll be expecting that news from the federal government, I would think, this week or early next week. So that's the heads up to get your lists in order so you can get that to your school administration. You might not have been top of the priority. They may have been trying to get PPE and basic sanitation supplies and some of those bigger issues solved. But with the next round of money, I think you're primed to get some things that you need too.
Yes. We have a question in the chat from Sheila that I'd be happy to take. The question is, when you say don't share keyboards, is sanitizing between classes okay, or do you recommend having enough for all classes? This is really going to be a use case kind of situation depending on your budget. Yes, it would be better to have enough for everyone to use their own, but knowing that that's often not possible. Yes, cleaning with a wipe of some kind for electronic keyboards would be okay. However, you want to contact your facilities crew, because each one of those wipes or each kind of spray or whatever cleaning solution you are using, it has a time to be effective. So you could imagine like a Clorox wipe. If you are using a Clorox wipe of some kind, or you don't have to use a name brand, but whatever you're using, there is a time from when you wipe until how much time needs to pass before it's been deemed effective in that cleaning. So you want to check with whatever you're using in your district to make sure that there's enough